If you have any questions, there is a Q&A window which you can type your questions into. During Q&A, you will have the opportunity to unmute your microphones, just raise your hand. I will probably call you out, and if you would like to interact directly with Tony, we will unmute your microphone. So Tony, hello, take it away.
Thank you, Janice. And yes, more than just questions, we hope to have an interactive part of this webinar because we really want to talk with you all about your experience, how you're using openBIM, and what your results are. We hope that this will be an exciting and informational session to help us all better understand true business values of openBIM. So, the very first question is, who cares about openBIM and why? Probably not a question for a lot of us on this call, but as we go further out into the industry, people have questions. So, one way to think about this is to ask who's requiring openBIM in their contracts. At the risk of invoking Richard Dawson, survey says a lot of governments have mandates established. Private owners and public owners, as well as their facility operators, are asking for openBIM deliverables so that they can have good data about their built assets to help them manage better and provide a better quality product for the people who use the facility. Well, we all kind of know that. The question is, how do we bridge that gap from half of them are asking to all of them are asking? And one way to answer that question is to think about a value statement. That is, why would you consider openBIM? And in fact, the decision makers are very eager to know why they should invest in openBIM. Quite frankly, the answer can be a little bit misty. Sometimes when they ask us, we talk about standards and services that are available. These are great, by the way. I don't mean to demean them. The other thing we do is we talk about how excited we are about using openBIM. And the ultimate result is frequently that, yeah, they're still a little confused. So buildingSMART, recognizing this, developed a strategic project, a very ambitious one, to create a data store that captures business value. That is a large strategic project that will unfold over years. A group of people, a group of chapters, got together to say, how can we take the first step? How can we jumpstart this? To quantify the values so that folks thinking about money and time have a reference point to understand what's possible, and also to document the good processes that help achieve these goals. Because it's really great to know that somebody was successful, it's even better to know how we can be successful ourselves. So 3 chapters got together and funded and sponsored with in-kind this activity. You'll see Brazil, Portugal, USA. Also, we've gotten support from international and a private benefactor, Strategic Building Innovation. So what are we going to do today? Well, the first thing, we're going to look at the process that this team unfolded. We're going to look at the metrics that are being used to demonstrate real value. We're going to show what we've learned so far. And most importantly, we're going to engage you, hopefully during this webinar, but also we have a process for doing interviews. There are perks for signing up for these interviews. You'll be the first to get the results, and you will also be credited in the study report that will be released to all buildingSMART chapters internationally. We'll talk about how to get involved in a moment. So first, let's walk through the process to see what we're planning to do and what we're planning to get for what we do. The very first step was to establish meaningful metrics, things that are not just easy to measure, but things that will actually inform business decisions so that the people investing in openBIM understand what they're investing in and what their expected return might be, and also so that the people on the project teams understand the goals that they're trying to achieve, so that they're all pulling together in the same direction. The artifact from that, categories of metrics, priorities of metrics, and the actual measures, the things that we'll document. The next step is to gather real world business evidence, not just opinion. So we started with surveys and we'll be doing interviews. The objective here is to get quantified metrics, not just we think it went well. We think it went better than last time. Oh, we really enjoyed the process. Those are valuable forms of input. However, if we can put numbers to it, it was 5% faster, or we saved 3%, or we got the drawings out in 20% of the time because we didn't use drawings. We used a model as a legal document. We're also looking at pluses and deltas. Pluses meaning things that worked really well, we're going to do that again. Deltas meaning, oh, well, that didn't work so well, but we have an idea of how to do better next time. This information is very important for anyone adopting any new technology, and especially openBIM. We're also getting information through the interviews on what processes were used so that we can better understand the how as well as the what. The next step will be analysis, where the team will look at all the information that's gathered and give comparative metrics. That is, how does one approach stack up against another? What are the exemplary achievements that we can all use as inspiration? And what are the proven good practices to get there? And then finally, all this information needs to be in the hands of the people who need it. So we're planning to do briefings ourselves so that we can present what we've learned and to disseminate this information so that other members of the buildingSMART community can also educate and help with raising awareness among anyone in the industry. And to achieve that, we're going to develop presentation materials. We'll help host webinars, and we'll also do continuing updates so that as we learn new things, they can be built into this whole process. Here's an example of some presentation material that's developed from another program. This comes from the buildingSMART awards program. And as you can see, it is a pretty slide. And it's more than a pretty slide. It includes quantified metrics. It talks about the motivation for doing this project. It talks about how the project goals were achieved. So this is from the focus of a built asset. We also have other material done from the focus of the technology and the processes involved. A little more dense for some people, but also very, very valuable for those who are planning the work. So coming back to the process, let's do a slightly deeper dive. We mentioned that the very first thing to be done was to establish meaningful metrics. This was done in a couple of ways. The big launch was a workshop, an in-person workshop that was also available online, done in Sao Paulo. This group of people got together and started to talk about the metrics that really matter to them and the metrics that they already had. They developed 8 categories, and we'll talk more about those categories in just a moment. But the exciting thing for them was not only could they surface this broad way of thinking about openBIM benefits, but in the spur of the moment, they were also able to gather some examples. These are just 4 of the metrics that people had at hand in the room with them. And you can see that they're pretty interesting. Maybe to those of you who are well experienced with openBIM, they don't seem earth-shattering. 50% reduction in quantity takeoff labor hours is, of course, because the openBIM facilitated automating that process. And yet, for a project manager or a built asset owner trying to think about what value they could possibly derive from openBIM, knowing that cutting labor hours from the time it takes them to get their project can be quite valuable. And interestingly enough, not every built asset owner in the world knows that these kinds of things are achievable. So you can see some of the other examples here. As we take a dive into what these 8 categories are, the team developed some examples that we can talk about. For example, for design and engineering quality, thinking about not only more design alternatives, which can be generated automatically, but also the ability to evaluate and optimize design alternatives. So we're looking at better design choices. In terms of team coordination and clarity of information, all of these things help contribute to decision making, to optimize the delivery schedule, not just shorten it, but make sure that we're using the time wisely. Are the crews in the right places on the construction site? Are we able to reduce the amount of analysis time during design? If there's a question, how can we answer it quickly and accurately to reduce latency? Um, Also, in terms of value and life cycle, it's not just in terms of cost cutting or the kind of restrictive value engineering we sometimes think about. Of the asset and the physical performance, getting a little Vitruvian here, we want the facility to be durable. We want it to provide the right firmness, commodity, and delight. Okay, well, the slide really wants me to get to the point where we talk about importance. So let's talk about that. We did an online survey with these 8 categories, and we had people rank them in terms of what was most important to them. And what we found is that the design quality and the communication and collaboration were top on the list. And then the life cycle costs and the ability to get good operational management were next. And you can see project delivery, time management, asset performance, safety and security, somewhat less important for the people making the decisions about using openBIM. So when we start thinking about what to measure, we need to think about what really matters. And this is a sort of thought exercise that we went through for ourselves. Um, do we really want to measure the number of clashes that we find, or do we want to reduce rework in the field? Do we really want to say, oh, we used to have hundreds of requests for information and now we've got none, which is easy to measure, by the way, or that we're quickly addressing the most critical issues and getting answers to the people who need them? Do we want to say, oh, yeah, we have meetings 3 times a week and everybody is always at those meetings? Or do we want to make sure we're making timely decisions that stick, that don't need to be rethought later? So this kind of thinking, focusing on the things that are in teal color here, help us understand what sort of things to measure. So we want to be able to reduce delays and costs from coordination errors. Or if you want to think on the upside, we want to measure on-time delivery. We want to reduce the delays due to inadequate information. On the flip side, that's increasing the on-time responses. We want to reduce the delays and costs due to late or revised decisions. A critical thing about revised decisions is sometimes if we change our mind later, it's just a matter of changing the design. But sometimes if we change our mind later, it's a matter of unbuilding something that was built and having to build it all over again. So that's often a critical factor. Um, the other side of that is we can measure on-time durable decisions. First thing is consensus on meaningful metrics. The next thing is beginning to build real world evidence. And we did that at first via surveys. So let's look at some of the survey results. We understand that how people are using BIM during design is focused on coordination, cost estimation, model authoring. And you can see how the list sort of fades a little bit as you get to the right. Program analysis, structural analysis, energy analysis, still done, just not done as frequently as coordination. One way to think about this is it means people really learned how to do clash detection a while ago, and they're still doing it. The more advanced uses are a little less popular among the people surveyed, and that's understandable, but it's something that we can change by raising awareness and also through training, putting in a little plug for our educational program. How openBIM is used during operations, space allocation and occupancy, something that's been going on even with CAD in the 1980s, is now still a very important use. But look at what scored number 2 on the list: carbon emissions, maintenance work orders, and preventive maintenance sort of tied for second place. That's really interesting. It means people aren't just looking at how they're filling their facilities, they're looking at how to keep them up and running and how to keep them eco-responsible. And that opens some doors for us to consider this value proposition. So here we are today, And we're looking at the interview process. We've already accomplished some interviews, and here's some of the data that are coming from these real world examples. You can see in some cases, like enhancing a public dictionary, this is a buildingSMART data dictionary. We're looking at the implementation of technologies to prove that it can really be done and to prove that it really matters, at least for some projects and some clients. And then we start to look at more outcome metrics, um, time reduction for tracking assets, reducing wasted materials during construction, being able to check exit paths and routing for things like hospitals, to be able to check many, many different possibilities in just minutes instead of having to take them by manual processes, and also being able to improve efficiency of finding information. So all that's very exciting. But you know what's more exciting? What's more exciting is being able to engage this group of people to hear what you have to say, what your experiences are, how you might contribute. What you see on the screen now is a set of office hours that Janice and I have set up to be available at specific times, 3 times a week, well, 3 days a week, 5 times a week, to be able to conduct online interviews with you. And let's talk a little bit more about what that process is, and then we'll tell you how to sign up for an interview, because I hope you're all excited about this. So the interview questions have been developed by the team sponsoring the project and also by the education committee at buildingSMART USA. Um, we want to know background as well as numbers. We need the context to understand what's the environment that makes the need and how do we go about addressing those needs. So the first question is, what led you to choose an openBIM approach? What specific functions did you employ? What processes? Was it BCF? Was it IDS? Was it something else that led to the performance improvements? What openBIM standards or services or model uses contributed to the performance? So were you doing clash detection? Were you doing some kind of energy analysis? Were you doing 3D visualization? Was it immersive? Just want to know what it was that you were doing on your project team. And how did open standards and services contribute to this? Because we're focused here not just on proprietary BIM, but specifically on open BIM, the things that allow us to share information freely and know we're going to be able to get our hands on it later, even if there are changes in the vendor profile. Then we'll finally talk about specific metrics. What were the results? What did you measure? Or if it's an ongoing project and you'd like to engage, we have experts on tap that can help you decide what to measure and how to measure it in a low impact way that doesn't increase the overhead of the project or the cognitive load of the people who are working on it, but can slot easily and conveniently into the workflow you already have. You'd be surprised in some cases, a second to click a button is all that's necessary. So then, what are the performance improvements now that we know what we measured? What was the change in those measurements? Usually, we like to see a baseline and an after. We'd like to know what that baseline was and how it was measured. Um, it isn't necessarily the case that this needs to be strictly numerical or on a specific project. In some cases, an experienced project manager will be able to say, well, our rule of thumb for this process is 5 days because of the latency in exchanging information back and forth between the teams. But we developed these collaborative sessions using the models, and we were able to resolve our issues in 2 days. That's the NASA experience. What would you have done differently? This is really important. As we're pioneering new ways, we're probably learning along the way. And it is really beneficial if, having tried something, found where it was strong and where it was weak, if we can share the information about where it was weak and how to strengthen those elements, we can all move forward together more quickly and more effectively, more confidently. And then also important, what are the skills required in order to meet these accomplishments? So it's great to have wonderful tools and wonderful processes, but if the project teammates are uncomfortable with them, they don't know how to use them, or they get confused, or it slows them down because they've got a steep learning curve, then it's difficult to show a benefit to the project and it's difficult to get collaboration and buy-in. So understanding the skills that are required helps us put together training programs in advance. So when people encounter something new, they're already familiar with it, they know what to expect, and they have confidence in their skills. Finally, we'll get to the point where we can ask if we can use imagery from the project. And all this goes into building those presentation materials that we'll use in our own webinars and that we'll make available in a data store so that other people can take exemplary projects and talk about how they were accomplished. It's always good to illustrate those. Obviously, we'll ask if we can use your project in the case studies. And finally, we'll give you an opportunity for last licks. Any other comments that you might have that you want to make that you think will be beneficial? So I feel like I've been talking for an awfully long time. And finally, we're getting to the point where, oh, please, everyone, whip out your mobile phones and look at that QR code. That will take you to a Zoom website that lets you sign up for a free space in the office hours that Janice and I are keeping. Um, we let you book for half an hour. Feel free to book for an hour if you'd like. The point is, we'll talk about those questions that you just saw. And as soon as you sign up for an interview time, we'll also email you those questions in advance so that you can be prepared and not just have these questions flying at you, you know, in an unexpected way. So with that, um, Janice, I'm hoping that people are chomping at the bit, wanting to unmute their microphone or microphone.
For joining us today. Thank you, Tony, for this session. I hope everyone sees potential value in openBIM after this. And if you have any stories to share, any experiences and pain points, and we'd love to hear them.
Okay. Janice, I have some housekeeping at the end. Would you like me to start that now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Here we go. All right. When last we left our superheroes, they were talking about interviews. Um, and there's lots more. Janice wants me to be sure to remind you that there are all sorts of ways to get involved. And even though I've put this interview QR code center stage, you can also become a member in the chapter. And you can join the Building Smart USA events. So I'll give you a moment to like screen capture or photograph these things. And I'll move to the next exciting thing, which is the project team that you see at the top of this slide, Aiden, Calvin, Jose, Luis, Rodrigo, and Sergio, will all be in Berlin to do a presentation on this very project, September the 24th. It will also be available online for those of you who aren't going to be jetting to Germany, but they will have a panel discussion covering their motivations about being involved, why they decided to support this effort, what they've gotten out of it so far, where they hope it will go. This will be a 90-minute session, and the first 30 minutes of this session, before they start to talk about this metrics exercise, we'll talk about government mandates for openBIM around the world. And I think there are, well, certainly more than a dozen countries that have already contributed information about their openBIM mandates. And you'll be able to learn more about those through the first part of their session. We will also be doing an upcoming webinar on that very topic here in the chapter. And then I really want to plug learning, not only because of my role with Building Smart, but because people do better when they know what they're doing. So we do have a good offering of courses here in the chapter, which you can access by using this QR code. The foundation course is the Building Smart international developed curriculum that gets you a certification if you pass the test. It's a really fun course. It provides background. It is highly conceptual in nature, and it is the entry point to make sure that you're speaking the same language and understanding concepts in the same ways that other people engaged in the Building Smart activities understand them. And then we've got a couple of courses that are tailored for here in the US. One of them is leveraging openBIM for project management. This is especially useful for project managers who are introducing openBIM for the first or second time on their projects. Even though they're seasoned and they know how to run a project, openBIM introduces some wrinkles, some opportunities, some potential pitfalls, and we use this course to bring people up to speed. It is newly available as a largely online course. There are 3 modules that you can view through LearnDash. And then just as with the foundation program, there is a colloquium session for 90 minutes. Building Smart requires a colloquium session, even for online learners. And the reason is they want to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk to the experts who develop the courses, to ask questions, and to share your experience with the course, because it's a Kaizen situation where the courses are continually being updated. And then the third course that we offer here in the chapter is one on applications. This is primarily to help people understand how to choose applications. How do you set up your criteria? How do you make sure that your applications are meeting your specific needs for organization or project? This also includes a little bit of hands-on time. It is an online course, but it is all real-time instructor-led. So that's 9 hours that happen in three-hour sessions online in a webinar setting with an instructor who's interactive with you at the time. So I hope you'll consider all those options. And Janice also wants me to emphasize that you should stay informed and stay connected. We do have a monthly webinar series. The website is newly updated thanks to Janice, and it's very easy to navigate and quite lovely in my opinion. Subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out, is it once a month now, Janice? Or is it once
Every week.
every week now? Okay, we'll cut that part out of the video too. and and follow us on LinkedIn because there's always something exciting going on. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you got value out of it. You know how to email us. Get in touch. Share your thoughts. Be an active part of the community, because the important part about open BIM is that it's open to everybody so that we can collaborate and do better as a team than we would have done as an individual. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.